Man, what a big missed opportunity. May the 4th was a Friday this year, and you released this movie 3 weeks after. The Han Solo film is 80% directed by Ron Howard after the original directors, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, were given the boot by producer Kathleen Kennedy due to their conflicting visions. This movie takes place during the reign of the Empire when our beloved Han is in his 20s. He gets separated from his lover Kira when they try to escape from the crime world they've lived in all their lives, and he vows to himself to become a pilot to find her again. This leads him on his adventures that we've heard mentioned in the original trilogy, but have never seen how they played out. And that is the real reason that this movie exists, to show us how things that were mentioned in the original trilogy played out. We see how Han and Chewbacca met, Han winning the Millennium Falcon in a gamble with Lando Calrissian, and using the Falcon to make the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. If that's what you want, that's what you get. But this is still an underwhelming effort for writer Lawrence Kasdan, who had worked on The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and The Force Awakens. The problem is that all these references to the original trilogy are held together by a drawn-out plot with thinly written characters. Part of this may be due to the clashing vision and change of directors, but I tend to think it was purely because they didn't think beyond an excuse to make this movie possible. The script contains some rather sigh-worthy lines, particularly an instance where they do the reverse of the franchise's catchphrase, when Han says, "I have a good feeling about this." It just came off like in the Planet of the Apes remake when the ape colonel says, "Take your stinking hands off me, you damn dirty human." And there are times where this movie gets more desperate to create aha moments than the prequels do to include popular characters from the original trilogy for cheap fan service. One instance that I think will be a groaner for some viewers is that we learn how Han got his last name. It's when he enlists in the Imperial Navy, and because he's a loner with no parents, the recruiting officer just writes down his last name as Solo. Now, considering Han's circumstances, I guess this does kind of make sense, although because of the setting, I always thought that Solo referred to the sun. You know, Sol, the Latin root for sun. Still, I'll shrug and say I'm fine with it. But there are other instances where it is obviously desperate. For example, we all know how the Millennium Falcon has that rectangular gap in its front. In this movie, we learn that the Falcon was built without that gap, and a crash landing at one point in the movie just breaks out that chunk. What was the point of that? Was there really someone who was kept awake at night wondering why the Falcon had that shape in the original trilogy? And it also creates a small hole in this universe, because in Revenge of the Sith, the Millennium Falcon made a discreet appearance, and we can see that it doesn't have that piece. And this movie takes place after Revenge of the Sith. What's next? Is there going to be another spin-off set before Rogue One where we learn that the Death Star was originally built as a cube, even though we saw its spherical construction at the end of Revenge of the Sith? Now, despite what little this movie does to make itself relevant to the Star Wars universe, it has merit. Alden Ehrenreich does a surprisingly good job as Han Solo. Although his resemblance to Harrison Ford is only passable, he gets the charming, condescending mannerisms down really well. It's no wonder that Harrison Ford himself praised his performance. Donald Glover is perfectly cast as Lando Calrissian. Even with Ehrenreich, I was aware that I was seeing a different actor playing a young Han Solo. That thought never crossed my mind with Glover. I just saw young Lando. The one thing that this movie does better than The Last Jedi is that it has more imaginative world building. The environments and creature designs were more inventive, like there's a crime boss that's this giant caterpillar thing. It looked pretty neat. And there are some very memorable sequences. The scene where Han and Chewie meet is funny and endearing, the Kessel Run is cool, and there's a thrilling heist on board this monorail-like transport. Though granted, I am a sucker for action sequences on board trains and monorails and whatnot. And John Powell's new musical score is also worthy of some praise. Plus, I'll give the movie this. It averted my expectations in regards to Emilia Clarke's character, Kira. Because she's Han's love interest, I kept thinking even before I saw the movie that she was going to die, because Han eventually falls for Leia. It does take a different direction with her character. In fact, it looks like she's going to become important in the franchise later on, so a few points for unpredictability in one area. However, even though Alden Ehrenreich did a good job, Han himself doesn't have much of an arc, and I would have liked to have seen more of what made him who we know him to be in A New Hope. Sure, we see a lot of his delightfully cocky attitude, but he had another side to him too. Remember when Luke first learned that Leia was in peril? He's like, they're going to kill her, and Han retorts, better her than me. I think this movie should have included something to show how he got that side of him. In the end, I can't say that I'm disappointed because this movie is about what I expected. It's ultimately corporate commercialized Star Wars, with the purpose of showing us things that were told in the main films, and to build up future spin-offs, which this movie does leave a lot open by means of a jaw-dropping reveal towards the end. I would almost recommend this movie just for that. I find enough in Solo: A Star Wars Story to give it a 60%, which is actually the same score that I would give Attack of the Clones. So I am torn right now on which of those two I consider my least favorite of the now 10 Star Wars films. I feel almost obligated to say Attack of the Clones, purely based on the fact that it's one of the prequels, but I'll see how well Solo holds up later on. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this review helpful. Like if you liked, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.